So what I will tell you is when my son, so I have two sons, and one was 15 at the time, Bryce, and the other was 16. And my 16-year-old son, this is 2 weeks before the Virgin Diet's launching, 2 months before pub date, craziest time. I've invested everything that I had and borrowed some too to make that book a success. And I'm the financial support for my family. So that's the stage. And then my son, gets hit by a car, hit and run while he's out walking, and left for dead in the street. And I'm in torn aorta. They were like, shouldn't have gotten up off the pavement. But he didn't get off the pavement. They, took him on an airlift, but they said he never should have made it off the pavement. He'll never survive, he'll never survive this first hospital. So basically we overruled the doctors, got him airlifted to another hospital. And I remember sitting in that hospital after he'd survived the airlift and the first surgery that he needed, one of many, many, and holding two fingers of his and talking to him and telling him he was going to be 110%. And I don't even know where that came from at the time. I just felt so guided that Grant is going to be 110%. And Grant, I just need you to fight. Now, after the fact, and I wrote a book about this, A Warrior Mom, people were like, how did you know how to do these things? And honestly, Dan, I was like, I don't know. And I realized that at the age of 30, I had this amazing mentor. And so when Grant got hit, my responses were so much a part of me that I didn't have to think. It was completely just who I was and how I behaved. And I think this is so important. If you're going to pick anything to work on to change your life, it has to start with your mindset. Whether it's diet or relationships or career, it's not a strategy that's the thing holding you back ever. It's always a mindset issue. There's always the strategies out there, but what gets you stuck? What makes you stop? What makes you give up? That's not a strategy problem. That's a you problem, right? So at the age of 30, I was very fortunate. I'd met this woman, and I remember I was 28, I think, when I met her the first time. She was my personal training client in Florida. I was going to University of Miami in sports medicine. And she said, we were walking down the beach, and she goes, so why are you in grad school? And I go, I want to be able to help more people. She goes, oh, all right. She goes, what are you going to do when you graduate? I said, I'm going to go to doctoral school. She's like, why? And I go, because I want to help more people. She goes, you don't need to go to school to help more people. And it was so much how I'd always been trained was like, you just get more education. You get more education, get more education. And she said that, and I'm like, okay. Now, the crazy thing was this woman was a self-made multimillionaire who had a high school education and grew up in a trailer park. And never really thought about that part. I just was like, that's interesting, but I don't believe it. I'm going to go to doctoral school. So right. Fast forward 2 years, I'm 30. I'm in doctoral school at USC, exercise, phys, nutrition, and aging. I get a little box. And it's a box from an MLM company, New Skin, who'd launched a nutrition program. And it talked about trading time for money and how you make impact. And a light bulb went off in my head. And I literally sold my personal training business, dropped out of my PhD program, gave away all my stuff, got in my car, drove to Florida, wow. Moved in with her. And what was so interesting was, and yes, I am impulsive. And, but I just was led. And, it's interesting. You look and you go, those pivotal moments in your life that changed the complete trajectory of not only your life, but so many people's lives. And that was it, where she taught me over 6 months. Here I was, I thought I was moving in. I was going to learn how to be successful in business. And the first thing she did was put rubber bands around my wrist. And she said, every time you have a limiting belief, snap your wrist. And I thought, I have just dropped out of my PhD program, sold my business, got rid of all my stuff, and moved across the country, and I'm putting rubber bands on my wrist, and I need to not be so impulsive. What was I thinking? I was like, I can't believe I did this to myself.
Sure.
But I'm there, so I put the rubber bands on, and boy, it's amazing if these are left unchecked, how many limiting beliefs that we have. How much judgment, how much criticism, especially harsh self-criticism. So I was snapping my wrist quite a lot. It was pretty red. And, so we did that. Then she had me start back then. I was using a Sony Walkman with audio cassette tapes from Nightingale Conant, and I was listening to everybody, Wayne Dyer and Og Mandino and Les Brown, all the greats, Brian Tracy. And she just started teaching me that the only limitations are the limitations in your mind, that there is no right or wrong, there just is. That you need to listen, truly listen. And as she started to say all this stuff, I remember thinking, well, of course there's limitations, right? Well, of course there's right or wrong. I guess she would say this stuff, and I'm like, there are no victims, only volunteers. I'm like, of course there's victims, but you're around it enough, and you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with, right? So she had me around all of her people. Everyone was like this. Hey, you're around it long enough, that's what you become too. And so it was everything you hear about in the secret law of attraction. I was full body immersed into all of this for 6 months and then for years after. And so it was a point that I didn't think about anymore. It just is who I am. And when my son got hit and the doctor told us we needed to let him die, my son Bryce was exactly the same way. So was my ex-husband, because they'd all been around me. Bryce was like, the doctor said there was a 0.25% chance he'd make it. And Bryce said, we'll take those odds. It's not zero. And that's what we did. And all 3 of us, we were like, he's going to be 110%. What do we got to do? We never looked at the 99.75. We stuff would show up in the hospital. There was not really much along the way, Dan, that was like, oh, he's going to be great. No, I mean, it was one thing after the next. The neurosurgeon saying, we don't think he'll ever wake up. The orthopedic surgeon saying, we don't think he'll ever walk. One thing after the next, I was like, I'm not going to believe you. My ex-husband tells Grant, you have our permission to prove every single doctor wrong. And, it's been 8.5 years. Gosh, coming up, 8.5 years. He is better than before the accident. He has proved them all wrong. I wish more of them would ask, what did you do? But beyond all the things that we did, from stem cells to hyperbaric to neurofeedback to high-dose fish oil to progesterone, beyond all that, I believe that, and I know it for a fact, if that first night we hadn't said, it's not zero, we'll take those odds, that would have been it. And most people, I think, would say, oh, okay, right? I was going, gosh, how do I tell people that they have a choice, that they can fight, and that even if he wasn't going to make it, at least I know we did everything that we could possibly. But I believe that we so saw him healed and better than before the accident. You have to see it in your mind's eye, right? First, everything's created twice, and you have to see it there to believe it. And we were so entrenched in that we just took every step forward to make it happen. And it was a very crooked path to success. There were definitely times along the way when I'm like, but I had people to call on during those times, and, you just keep pushing forward.
Wow. I've heard you share that story, like I said, on different podcasts that I've listened to, but there's something about hearing it right now in the moment that is hitting a different chord with me right now, an emotional chord. And I think, going back to what you were saying with the wristband activity, it's amazing how much we say horrible things to ourselves. And, I've heard different people, I think I've come across it on social media, that if we had somebody in our life that talked to us the way that we talk to ourselves, we would never keep them around as a friend or anybody in any kind of relationship. And I think what you're getting at there is it's so important to pay attention, be aware of how we treat ourselves and the limiting beliefs that we have, and shift that, right? It's just about deciding, I'm going to do this. And once you make that decision, that's it. That's all it takes.
And it just starts first with, you've got to be there's so much stuff you're not even aware of. It's like the fish. It's true. The fish doesn't know it's in water, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think, as you mentioned, you did all those different things to get to your son to the point that he got to get to 110%. And I love that you said that he's better than he was even before the accident. I think that's probably one of the neatest parts of the whole story.
It's super neat. It was interesting, Dan, because we finally at the point where I went, oh my gosh. I actually, 2 weekends ago, we were doing a really cool event with my family, kind of a family healing event. And I went, wow, I don't need to be warrior mom anymore. I can retire because there's no more fixing here. He's absolutely there's nothing here to do. Okay.
So cool. What a powerful message, especially for people that feel like they need a big change in their life. And look, last year and even into 2021, so many people are going through so much change. But I think a lot of us can agree that as bad as 2020 was, there was a lot good that came from it, a lot of good shakeup and a lot of good growth and development. And I know I personally am better than I was a year and a half ago, right? And it was because I took certain steps in my life to improve my health, improve my relationships, not just with other people, but improving the relationship with myself, I think was the biggest step. So I think that's a really powerful message, a great story, a successful story of your son. Good for him. He probably doesn't get enough of the credit as you talk about it on all kinds of, interviews in media. But good for him and your family for overcoming that.
And I'm glad you recognize that, because yes, I could bring the tools. He had to go through all of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably a forgotten piece often.
And trust me through some of it, that it was like, some of it didn't work. Some of it was just awful. He's like,
yeah.
Mom, but
gosh, but boy, did you learn about yourselves, I'm sure, throughout that whole process.
We are so tight. It's interesting because, my family really is my bonus daughter, my new husband, my ex-husband, my two sons, and everyone, like, they're all tight, all of us, right?